Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel Teki Kumar. Today we are going to learn about exception handling, and this is specific about handling exceptions while writing REST APIs in Spring Framework. So for better learning, I have created one API which name is sum, and it is going to return the consecutive addition of those inputs. So from UI or from a REST client, we will call this API by passing a value, and in return we will get the sum of those values. So let's see how it is working. So this is my endpoint. So I'm going to open my REST client. So this is the REST client where this is a call, and API name is sum, endpoint is sum, and I'm going to provide a value as 1. So I was just testing before starting the recording, so let me just restart this application so that we can reset the values. Okay, good. So now if I just enter 0, so we will get as 0 as an input. Now if I return 1, if I add 1 as an input here, so we will get the sum 0 plus 1 1, and if I put 5, we will get as 6. So actually I have taken one static variable here, and whatever input we are receiving from the REST client, we are adding that to that sum variable. So hope it is clear. Now then, why we are talking here about exception? So just give me few minutes, I will let it clear to you. So now I'm going to pass a value which would be a string. So I can put any string. I can take QW, a string, or maybe I can take it like 1AD2. So this is not a valid integer number, and we cannot add them to an integer. So let's see what output we are receiving from the API. Okay, so we got 500 internal server error, and we got this. So now this error Spring Framework is returning, right? But now if we go to IntelliJ, excuse me, we got this error here, right? But this error is not that much meaningful to the caller, right? Here we are a caller here, right? We are calling the API through the REST client. So as a consumer, I'm not able to understand what happens wrong when I provided this input. So whenever we get such a invalid input, we should provide a proper error message so that the caller or a user or consumer should correct their input values. For example, to correct this, what I could do, I could put inside a try block, because I know this is a number format exception, so I could just handle that format exception here. And here we can see invalid input, please enter, or we can put in this way, only numbers are allowed. Okay, so we can put like this. Let me save this and restart this application. Good. So let's test the positive scenario first. Let me add 10 to 0, so I get 10. If I add more 5 to it, then I'll get the sum as 15. Now I'm going to add 5a. Yes, so now we got a proper message. Invalid input, only numbers are allowed. So because there is problem with the invalid is the input, and that is invalid, so user or caller should be aware about this problem. And as a developer, whenever we are writing any REST APIs, we should be able to handle these exceptions appropriately so that customer of this API or consumer of this API should be able to know what's wrong with the input values. Okay, yeah. So I mean, this was the very short example. So let's see, like, how we can handle them properly in while writing REST APIs. So this is also an example of a REST API written in Spring. So I have taken one more, I have developed an application in the Spring REST, and we will go through that and we will learn how we can handle them. So before going into that, another project or another example, I would like to discuss, is this a correct approach? So let's say I'm going to create another API, and that API will also return a number format exception, and that time we are having the same exception. Let's say I can make it as 1, for example. So we are repeating the same thing again and again. So is it a correct approach? I would say no. Why? Because we are having a number format exception which would be always happening for one reason, and that is in getting a invalid input, and we are Java is not able to pass that input as a number. So there could be no other reason. So that's why instead of handling them here, we can handle them at from some central level where any exception, any number format exception occurred throughout the application will return this error message, and we don't need to handle them explicitly. And that is how this global exception handling comes in picture, which makes the developers life easy, and the code would be like, we will avoid the redundant code while writing, and the maintenance will also be easy. Let's go to another project. So this is the another project I have created, Spring Bean validation, that we discussed in the last video, where we discussed how we can validate a bean. So now, while validating the bean, definitely we will get some exception. So let me show you. This is the user request, okay, where we need to provide a name which should not be null, age should not be greater than 18, and should not be should be greater than 18 and should not be greater than 60. Okay, it should be less than equal to 60. And we have some validation for phone and email, so that we already discussed in the previous tutorial, where we have discovered bean validation. I will attach that link in the comment section, and you can go through that. So now in this video we are going to discuss about how to handle the exceptions globally. So let's see like how it is happening. First see the output, and then we'll discuss about how we have implemented here. So before getting into that, I will stop this application, close this IntelliJ because we are not going to use this anymore. Close this one as well. Okay, good. So now I will start this application. So going here, start. Okay, so if we go to console here, application is started on 8080 port, and we have a user controller where we can create a user by passing the proper user request objects. So let's get into the client, and if I do control Z here, this is the request object, and I just need to, or I can take it from the history as well. Yeah, here it is. Good. So this is the post object. I'm going to create a user, and here you can see that I have provided a invalid email, right? So testemail.com, and we are getting up. So let me hit it again. Okay. So now we are getting 400 bad requests, and we are getting a proper error message where it says like email must be a well formed email address. There is a problem with phone as well. First phone number must be of 10 digits only. And if we talk about age is also not valid. So looking at this response, anyone can understand what's wrong with the input values, right? And that's the purpose of handling, exception. If something goes wrong, the consumer should be able to understand what's wrong with their input values. Just returning 500 internal server error, that doesn't make any sense to the caller. Okay, so we need to handle them appropriately. So let's see how I have handled in this project. Okay, so now let me take this pencil here. Okay, so you can see that I have created one controller here, and inside this controller we have a method request object, right? So this user request, we are going to create a user. This is the mapping, and is user request we have annotations. So we already discussed here in user request, we saw that, right? We have validations. So how it is working? So if we go to here, user request, let me go one by one. So if I go here, I showed you, right? We have this validation, but when it is failing, how we are handling it? So let's go back. Okay, so user controller. Now we'll go inside the save service. So we are not seeing any try catch block anywhere. Then how it is working? Even if we go inside the save, this is the DAO layer, right? We are not seeing any try catch block anywhere inside my code. Then how we are getting a proper error message? So the idea here is, what we are doing, we are, just one second, let me clear this out. Okay, so what we are doing, we are using a class called global exceptional advice. So we are using this annotation, rest control advice. And whenever we create a class and use this rest controller advice, it will be one bean will be created, right? As a component, it will be created in the Spring context, and it would be available in the Spring Spring container. Now inside this, we are using one annotation called exception handler. So inside exceptional handler, we have to provide the method argument not validation. Okay, so we need to provide the method, we need to provide the exception that we want to handle. So you can see that, right? Here we have like the exception we want to handle, we have mentioned that class name, and then we have handled that exception, and we are taking input as an argument here, method argument valid exceptions. Now what we are doing, we are having an array, we are having a hash map, and which will have a key value pair, and in the key we will, so here we have a key and here we have a value, right? So here we are in this key we are using filled, and here we are having the error message, right? So for example, name, so this is the filled, and the error message, name cannot be blank. So that is what we are doing here. And if you look at this, we are getting that X means exception, method argument not valid exception, it is returning a binding result, and using that we are iterating and we are updating the error map, and we are returning the error map in the response. So this is how we have handled the method argument not valid exceptions. So in the console log, you can see here, right? In the console log, we are finding this error here, right? Method not valid exceptions. So on the server, we will get that error, but we need to handle them gracefully, and we need to return a proper error message. So in this way, we have let me clear it out. So in this way we have, here we have handled the method argument not valid exceptions. Okay, and we have also returned a response status, what we need to response, http status dot bad request. Similarly, we have also handled one more exception, resource not found exception here. Okay, so let me, similarly we can handle one more exception, as many as number of exception we want to handle, we can handle it here. How? We can just use exception handler, exception handler, exception handler, and we need to put the class name, exception class name dot class, and just we need to create a class which will handle that, a string null, we can mention like this, handle null pointer exception, and here we can mention the class name instance, exception class name instance null pointer exception ne, right? And now here we can say that okay, return, and we can take a message like invalid input, only numbers are allowed. So now you can see, right, any exception if it happens throughout the application and which is throwing the null pointer exception, that will be caught here, and it will return a proper message, invalid input, only numbers are allowed. So we don't need to explicitly do try and catch for each and every exception. We can handle it here, whichever the exceptions which are generic. Okay, and we can return a proper error message to the caller. So I hope it is clear. It is very simple and it is very easy to understand. Let me conclude this and repeat it once again. So what we are talking here, we are talking about the REST controller advice. The first thing is REST controller advice. We need to create a class and annotate with REST controller advice, and then if we need to do response status, we need to mark the response status. Whenever this exception occurs, what kind of HTTP status you want to send back to the the client. And then the third thing is you need to mention the exception handler, which class of exception you want to handle. You need to mention the class name inside the as a value for the exception handler annotations. And then the third is you need to use the same exception as an input here. And fourth, you need to return the output. So there are 5 steps. There are 5 easy steps to handle the exceptions globally. Moreover, it doesn't mean that you don't have to use try catch block anywhere in this application. Yes, you can use, you should use, but which is not able to related to which is not going to be handled there itself. It's better to let it bubble up, okay, and it will be handled by the global exception advice. Okay, so these things which are generic and which can happen at any point of time due to invalid input, or maybe resource is not available, the exceptions which are known, right, which can happen, so let handle them here. And those exceptions which are like business related things, right, and that business is depends on that exceptions. So I mean, I'm not specific to particular scenario, but yes, there are scenarios where you have to use try catch block in the method itself. But in this scenario, I mean, while writing REST APIs, we must have to handle them gracefully inside a central place, that is like exception, global exception advice. We should use the advice here. Okay, So I think it's clear, and that's why we are in the, if you go to the response, right, if you see the response, let me take the pointer here. If you see the response, in the response we are getting the proper message, right? So whenever you are writing a REST API, please keep in mind that you need to handle exceptions, you know, in a better way, so that you return a proper response to the caller, to the consumer, so that they can understand what's wrong with their input values. So that's all for this video. I hope you guys understood the concept what I'm trying to explain here. It's not very difficult, it's a very easy topic. And if you have any questions, please drop a comment. I will try to answer them. And if you really like it, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thank you so much once again.